Welcome to Five Star Conversations, where we talk with hoteliers making a difference in the hotel industry. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Simon McGrath. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you. Welcome.
Simon, what we might do is we'll quickly start off I'll read your bio so that audience has a background, and then we'll ask some questions as to how you got in the industry and just get a bit of an idea of your career path. So Simon is one of Australia's most accomplished hoteliers over the past 30 years, having helped grow Accor to almost 400 hotels across the region and leading a team of 18,000 employees. He's been a multi-award winner of the Australian Hotelier of the Year at the HM Awards, and he has championed industry with local, state and federal governments, and he's also recently served as the President of Accommodation Association of Australia. Simon has over 3 decades of experience in the hotel sector and served for 16 years as the head of Accor in the Pacific region, following senior leadership roles with Southern Pacific Hotel Corporation and Rydges Hotels and Resorts. Simon is also the recipient of the Member of the Order of Australia for his services to the promotion of the Australian tourism internationally, and an accolade that was bestowed on him in the Queen's Birthday Honours List of 2019. So welcome again, Simon.
Thanks, Brendan.
Simon, I always like to ask, how did you get into the industry? Was it something that you knew you wanted to get into, or like a lot of my guests to date, it was an accident, to be honest? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I probably had followed a different path in that it was quite intended, in fact. I come from an Irish Catholic background, and that is often closely associated to pubs and hotel keeping, rich in our history. And so, as a young age, at 14 or 15, I was placed in pubs and spearing kegs and working in bars and so on, and doing all sort of the dirty work around a pub. And I did that during school holidays and so on. And then when it came time, during my HSC year, my father, who's a wonderful mentor, and he was fantastic at sort of reading each of his kids and sort of working out where he thought they should go. He sort of promptly placed me and headed me towards tourism and hotels, and it was known as hotels then. And I wrote to probably the only 4 5-star hotels in Sydney at the time.
Yep.
And the Boulevard being one of them. And during my last year at school, I was studying, and I wrote to them to try and get a job, and I landed myself a job in the laundry at the Boulevard Hotel, which, to this day, I fondly remember. To this day, I still use many of the learnings, and that was the start. So, from school holidays in pubs to 5-star hotels, which at the time were, they were incredible places. So, all these incredibly rich uniforms and levels of staff and silver service, and you really hadn't as a kid ever experienced that. I don't think I'd heard the word croissant, and yet I was dealing with them. In fact, I was knocking them off trays to eat them in the morning. But no, it was great. That was my pathway through, and it really felt pretty comfortable.
And is that how you started with Southern Pacific Hotel Corporation at the Boulevard, and then it progressed from there, or?
Yeah, SPHC were in fact the manager of that hotel, and the Boulevard was one of the few 5-star hotels SPHC had. And at the time, some may remember, they were the hotel group that was most prominent. They had the Park Royal and the Travelodge brands, and they really were an incredible force. And there were some great leaders in there, Graham Wackett, David Sargent, many others. And, they were the first. They were quite innovative in terms of HR. And so I was very lucky. After about a year of working in the laundry, I moved into the cellar, which I thought I'd killed it, and I was up at the heady heights of being in the cellar. But then they were kind enough to offer a management traineeship, which was for the whole group. And there were six young candidates that were selected for that. And I was lucky enough to get, in those days, what was termed a trainee manager, which was I could never be thankful enough for.
Yeah, that's amazing. I started my career with Southern Pacific as well in Melbourne, doing a gap year whilst I was at Victoria University. So not quite the traineeship, but we had a number of trainees going through the program. And you're quite right. They were the leading leaders of hotels, and they're responsible for so many of the leaders that we see today. And the Boulevard, I remember it was Blankety Blanks and all those shows. At the end, it used to say, and our guests choose to say at the Boulevard, Sydney. It was it was the hotel. That's amazing. And so, obviously, after your traineeship with Southern Pacific, sort of how long did you spend with Southern Pacific before you moved to Rydges and then eventually to Accor?
Yeah, I had a really a wonderful experience with Southern Pacific. I did a traineeship. In that traineeship, I learned to sort of, I guess go into different departments, and on that basis, because you moved into seven different departments over 3 years, you learn how to quickly assess a business need, apply yourself, and get an outcome. And then from there, whilst I was at SPHC, there was this great opportunity to go to Ayers Rock Resort. That just having sort of worked through a number of hotels in SPHC, they then approached me and said, "Look, would you like to go out to Ayers Rock Resort?" Which was quite unique. It was, you were running not just a hotel, but you were also running a suburb of and a town, and you learned so much more than just hotel keeping. And so it was really fortunate to do that. I did that for a couple of years and then transferred overseas to Kuala Lumpur with SPHC. So, with SPHC, I got breadth of commercial knowledge, but also, geographical spread. And that allowed me to start to really get a hunger for tourism and hospitality, particularly, and understand that, to really have a full breadth of tourism and hospitality, obviously that geographical expanse is all part of it. So I had ended up having, I think, about 7 or 8 years, 7 or 8 years with SPHC. And then from there, I had some time with Hamilton Island.
Okay.
And because there was a team of people, an executive team that had been at Ayers Rock Resort that then moved on to Hamilton Island, and that was a similar sort of environment. And then I joined Rydges, which was fabulous. I started as general manager with Rydges, but then moved into development, which again, another milestone for me that shaped my whole career, was working with David Sargent in a development capacity. It taught you investment, it taught you owners, it taught you, the value of a management contract, and it taught you a lot of hard work because, it was a lot of grind and you had to have a very clear focus. From Rydges, I then moved to Accor, actually. In fact, my first role with Accor was at Reef Casino in Cairns, and I knew it was a really important asset. I almost near killed myself doing development with Rydges and worked pretty hard. And the real reason for that move was, whilst development was great and it was pretty singular in its role, and I missed the leadership and I missed people. So I took the conscious decision to step out of development, having had some success there, and then go back into operations. But obviously, was able to mix both when we had the casino and the operations for Accor. And then joined that. And then I was post that, I was there about a year, and then David Basky and Michael Eisenberg called me to come to Sydney. And it was at a time when Michael was taking on the Asia Pac role, and they had invited me to come down and have a chat to them about looking at a greater role within Australia. And then that was the start of a wonderful 15 years of growth, and most importantly team building and great times.
That's amazing, Simon. How big would the Accor portfolio have been back in those days?
I think we had about 80 hotels at the time, 80, 90 hotels. So, we had a 15-year period where, the team were quite an extraordinary team. And, that team evolved, obviously, but the nucleus of the team, continued on, and we kept adding senior executives, and many, some moved on to different roles. But it was, we handled 2 acquisitions in Mirvac and Mantra, brought many new brands to the country, introduced, more importantly, great partners. We really started to cover, the development team in Accor, led by Lindsay Leesa, did a wonderful job, supported by all the operational leaders, to really understand the value of what we delivered to owners, and a respect behind that then we became the sought after chain for owners. And it was a wonderful time, and with so much innovation mixed in that as well.
Well, certainly Accor is strength in the Pacific region, and I think I've mentioned it before, but I was with Horwitz as a 22-year-old when I think it was AGC gave Accor that first property, and David Basky coming to office quite often. I was oblivious. I got the privilege of sitting in the boardroom once, but I remember being so young, I didn't actually appreciate what was going on at that point in time. It was quite strange. Years later, it's like, oh my gosh, that was pretty much the birth of Accor that I was at.
It was indeed.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And I did the also when I was at Horse, I did the property management system recommendation for the Novotel Darling Harbour. Crazy to think how much has happened across the years. Simon, is there It doesn't have to be embarrassing. Is there a funny story from your early career that sort of perhaps taught you a lesson that you never forgot?
There's many stories. I mean, I've made many mistakes, and not just in my early career. Throughout my whole career, I was very consistent on that basis. Not necessarily. It was probably more about. I look back and I'm embarrassed in many ways about earlier on in your career making assumptions about something and moving forward very quickly. And now, someone with a bit more experience, I sort of look at myself then and cringe a bit at how quick or how quickly I assumed something and tore through it and made decisions, and that served me well in most cases. But I'm probably cringe and I'm embarrassed about how little I knew and how much I thought I knew.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. As I was just saying, like when I look back at my time, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so naive. Right?
Yeah, but I think that naive enthusiasm also is infectious and powerful, and I guess you get away with it a little bit if you're somewhat honest and you're doing it for the right reasons. And I hope to think that most of everything was done for the right reason. So you probably get a bit of grace from people when you're that naive.
Naivety sometimes I found actually helps, because if you thought sometimes long and hard about it, you might be fearful to actually take that step. Whereas if you just approach it with that naivety, you're sort of like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no, I look back and many times I don't think I would have done half of what I've done if I had more knowledge.
there you go. Talking about that, and we were talking about obviously Graham Wackett at SPHC and David Sargent. What is it, or who is it that inspires you and has done over the years?
Yeah, I sort of live a life where I don't get disappointed by people that let me down or fail or have bad values, or I sort of learned many years ago, stop trying to correct those people. There are those people in business and life and so on, and you can get distracted by them heavily, and at times I did. And I was trying to correct people or fix a wrong and so on. So I now probably take a view. Whilst I don't get excited, I expect that from human frailty. What I do is I get very excited by people that have great values, and so when I come across someone that's just extraordinary in their values and how they apply themselves, I get so excited. So, and I've been so fortunate to have so many people, and look, an obvious one for me is Michael Eisenberg. He and I worked intimately together. We're both very different, but we come together on what I think are the big issues, and they're about values and truth and purpose and so on. So, yeah, I fondly, really enjoy my time with Michael, and to this day, that's the case. Equally, the reason we spend so much time in hotels, I've seen night managers that I still go back and see, and wonderful people, and they're very early on they were so rich in knowledge, not about their particular role, but about life, about their experiences and so on. So I could list a whole multiplicity of owners and investors that I've met, and they're in other businesses and other industries, and generally you logically feel very warm and attached to those that are very generous with their time. And I've been so lucky to have so much of many people's time, and probably too much in some cases. And it's been, it's lovely. So, but one that comes to mind is Michael. But I'm reluctant to talk about teams I've worked with because there's so many, and all of them have given something. I had an incredible, as I spoke about before, the management team in Accor was so generous with what they gave to the company and gave to the people we served. I was in awe of each of them, and it was a pleasure to work with them.
That's fantastic, Simon. Thank you. Simon, is there a particular skill or talent or hobby that you have that not many people might know about? Something unique? No?
I don't think there's a particular skill. I'm probably a skill that I think is important is asking questions. I sometimes bore people with the amount of questions I ask, but I feel pretty comfortable in any situation if I can get the opportunity to ask enough questions in any industry, in any situation, that I can whittle down a whole lot of information and get to the three key issues. So it's sort of something that served me well. It's something I'm probably confident with. I try and tell my kids, if you can do three things in life, you'll be pretty successful. One is work 110%, make people smile and ask questions. And so asking questions is probably a big part of who I am.
Yep. I love that. I love those three things. Yep. Make people smile 110% and ask questions. Simon, we're going to now have a chat about, I suppose, the industry as a whole. Are there any emerging trends that sort of make you either excited or nervous? And it can be either or. It could be the growth that we're going through, the future that the industry holds.
I think as an industry, it's very hard to get nervous about the future. I honestly mean this. I just think if we look at tourism and hospitality today, fast forward 25 years, are we going to be working less? Yes. Are we going to go to a 4-day week? More than likely. Will we be working 32 hours a week? Yes. Will work from home be embedded in union agreements and workplace agreements? Absolutely. And that flexibility. So what are people doing with that flexibility? If we look at 15 years ago, an executive would take 10 days off a year and have one long weekend a year. That's just what executives did, or any manager and employees. Now it's quite common to take the full 4 weeks and probably 5 long weekends. All that activity and all that time is being invested and placed in our hands in tourism and hospitality. It's not going into office and it's not going into many other sectors. So I think the future of tourism, no doubt, people just will continue to travel. That'll then be fueled by great airlines and low-cost carriers and so on, which we've seen. Then it's the sort of fear of missing out, which is driven by social media, which will continue. People are just sitting there. I can't tell you the amount of people I know that are in Europe at the moment, and most of them can't afford to be in Europe. And most of them 10 years ago would never have been able to spell Europe. So it's just extraordinary. So that's an example of people drawing down from house loans, buying one less car, not putting it into other areas and putting it into travel. So it's very hard to fear anything in the future. What I think excites me is that macroeconomic view, but more importantly, when it comes to technology, it's 10 years ago we were chained to archaic big platforms that we had to buy. And what you've seen in the last 5 years is proliferation of technology this subscriber-based technology that we can bolt on and plug in to our systems freely and comfortably. And it allows us to do the job of hospitality better. And there's some wonderful platforms that not only allow you to account for the particular transaction you're doing, they'll give you data, they'll give you insight to the customer. They'll allow you as an employee with your mobile phone that when you next meet the customer to say, look, how are you? Mr. Granger, nice to have you back. You've been here 4 times. You like this, you like that. And that's exciting. So I think technology is not cost prohibitive anymore. And what I like about that is a 30-room hotel can be technologically equally technologically connected as a 500-room hotel. And I think that's great for the industry. It's great for service and it's great for the future. So we're going to see much more of that. And in-room technology has changed substantially. We're not going to have to buy big in-room technology, platforms. It's a plug and play. People will bring their own content. And we're already seeing that. So I think technology is becoming, in a funny way, smaller, more affordable, quicker, more colourful, and more generous in content for customers. And it means that if you get into hospitality and you want to do your job well, technology allows you to do that now far better than it would have done 10 years ago.
I love that answer, and I totally agree. There's a lot of people that sort of fear that if we allow too much technology in the industry, we're taking away from, that people, I suppose, the experience. We are a people industry first. Do you feel that, or is it a matter of if we get the balance right, we can use technology to enhance the customer experience?
Well, there is a whole lot of technology that allows self-service. And I don't think we should, just because it doesn't come from a human, suggest that that's not service. So I'll give you the example of banks. Many people say banks are terrible at service. Well, I don't want to go back to the days where I can only go into a bank from 10 till 3 in the afternoon, Monday to Friday. I don't want that. I'd like going on at 1 in the morning and fixing up everything or doing this or checking my, doing various things. I think it's extraordinary service that the banks provide. Yes, there's a generation that's the next 5 or 10 years everyone will be connected and it'll be much more comfortable. And we're transitioning towards that, but that's great service. So I think the same in hotels. I mean, I think the ability for a customer to self-update their loyalty card and tell you where they like it and what rooms they like, what seat they want to choose, what dietary requirements. I mean, everyone says, again, the airlines, suffer in service. Well, I'm sorry, if I can put my dietary request on my account and I can look at my points and I can change my booking and pick my seat, and I reckon that's a pretty good level of service compared to what we used to do. So, yeah, I mean, there'll be technological service and then there'll be human service, and I think they're quite complementary and not competitive, but there's a transitioning to that which creates some uncertainty.
Yeah. Do you see at some point there may even be a brand within Accor or some of the other chains that really differentiates itself by being extremely high touch, even more so than the brands are now? And they're almost asking guests to, put away the technology when you come and stay with us and we'll look after you. I'm thinking, the equivalent, I suppose, of the Orient Express, where, it's a classic example. You've got an extremely small room, which is, got bunk beds and doesn't even have its own toilet. But because it's such an amazing experience, you are paying quite a premium for it.
Yeah, I think people will pay a lot for service, there's no doubt. I like to go to a restaurant. I don't need it to be provided. I don't need a discount. If I know the owner, I don't need a discount. I don't need it to provide it cheap, but I just love to know the person that's going to greet me. Because if I want my seat tidied up, or if I want the special request, I know there's someone that can, care for me and do the right thing. So I think that service element, when you go to a hotel, you travel all the way across the world to a beautiful hotel in Italy, you want to know the person and have some contact so that you can have that service. And people will always pay for that. People love that part of the industry. So I think people will differentiate themselves in many ways. I mean, service is, you could argue, is, having a full resurgence because of the rates that are being charged. We can now afford a little bit more service. And I think likewise, there'll be technology hotels as well that, and then there'll be the blend in between. But I think the large majority, often when we talk about technology, the debate had is often in the extremes. And so if you take the extremes out, then there's a large body of 85% of hotels that will be a beautiful mixture of, digital technology with human relationships. And it seems to have a good middle ground. And it's very hard these days for anyone to get a competitive edge because of the point I made. It's not about investment anymore. The small hotel and a large hotel can have the same technology, and that'll only become more and more present. So, yeah, I think there'll be a happy middle ground.
That's a good point, Simon. And to be honest, some of the smaller groups, that have a dozen or so hotels can often be a little bit more nimble than Accor, for example, because they can change their technology.
Yeah, I think the proprietary systems are the legacy issues that will be dealt with by the larger management companies over the next 10 years because they have to. They're slowing them down a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I suppose on that note, when you were at Accor, obviously technology, and we've talked about technology playing an important part. How do you stay up to date with technology and what's available out there?
I think, it's largely, I guess, probably traveling and experiencing technology yourself. I think so many of us just normal consumers. And I think if you come from technology, from a technological view, and be confident that the normal consumer is probably the most insightful consumer. And what I mean by that, if you know a lot about technology, having to tell that story and repeat that story and impose that story on people. But if you're someone that just uses technology, I'm sure I'm not dissimilar to others. If I pick up an app and I connect it and I sign in and it works, it stays sticky. If I have to go back and do it, I just had an example 45 minutes ago, downloading some plans. Okay, that's it. I'm not going back. I don't have time. So I think the confidence should be in the sort of the consumer. And so I guess if you want to be insightful as a hotelier, then you've got to be a bit of a consumer. I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot of hotels and sit in a lot of restaurants, and I think you pick it up. I think you pick most of it up that way, because you'll see that it moves so quick, you know. And there's a couple of platforms that are currently out in the market that are just rapidly moving across our market, and you hear about them. So I don't think I'm trying to give people confidence that you don't have to be a tech expert to not be invested in a tech strategy. Just be out there. Look at the table ordering systems. You know, there's two companies. They're great. They're interesting. You know, and just be inquisitive when you do see technology.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. Have an understanding of what your requirements are. Be very clear on that. And as you said, experience the technology. And there are also people to help you these days, you know, bridge that gap between, you know, what your requirements are and what technology is available out there as well.
And I think that's important. I think as you experience stuff, you can, the filter that you've got to put on it is the last thing is not always the best thing you've seen. So I tend to sort of roadmap everything and look at it. And then I go to someone and say, look, I want to orchestrate. You know, we've just looked at a hotel the other day, a number of our hotels, about 18 pieces of software that they're using to construct daily management reports, customer experience. It's just a mess.
Yep.
Because it's been layered on and layered on and layered on. So I think there's very much a role for people to say, look, this is what my table ordering, this is what my PMS is, this is how they connect. I think the next phase is actually planning that, because in the last 5 years, we've simply just thrown it at the hotels and they've layered it on. And there's a period of time where we can be a bit more sophisticated. And I do think you need expert advice to help you understand that. But knowing what you want can come from your experience, but then planning it, I think external advice is critical.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's a term for it. One of my guests that I interviewed last year, it's not the technology concierge, but it is, as you said, having somebody to help with that. And I love your point about the filter that you need to look at is, you know, make sure that the last thing you look at is not the thing that you think is the best. It's very common. I think it's a human trait that we remember that. They say from a customer service point of view, obviously in a hotel, if you can make the last experience with a guest the most memorable or the best, then issues that happen during the stay will sort of fade away into their imagination. But that's a really good point. Simon, as we sort of get ready to wrap up, my last question is just forward-looking question. If you were to look 3 years, 10 years from now, what do you think the hotel industry will look like? And is there anything you think we should be doing to prepare for that now?
Yeah, well, I think the hotel industry will be bigger. It'll be more colourful. It'll have a lot of lifestyle in it. You'll be in hotels and they'll make you feel healthier, good food, good experience, enrichment from a hotel. And I think, you know, certainly we'll hit that over 3 years, and in 5 years, in 10 years' time, I've got no idea. Absolutely no idea. But, you know, it'll be more populous, you would suspect. To plan for that, I think you need to have good people around you. Your suppliers, you need to work with people. I think the world is moving at such a fast pace and there's so much complexity. I don't think leadership is about being on your own. You know, I think leadership is generally, most teams in leadership are 2 to 3, 4 people now, smaller groups, but working together as a team. I fail to see one leader running a business well as one leader. And I think in terms of hotels, I think the complexity in F&B, the complexity in technology, the complexity in lifestyle, the operation of a hotel, the branding, the digital, you really need to make sure you've got the right partners with you as a group. So I think your supplier partners are really important. I think your investment partners are critical. Be careful of as I said, the latest fad, the latest investor, the latest this, you know, try and get people that can be on a journey with you for 10 years and are happy to change and happy to move forward. And aren't going to get spooked. And, you know, also prepare for there will be cyclical downturns. So don't get ahead of yourself, you know, don't keep stretching budgets too far. Make sure you invest back in the properties, you know, be a bit counter-cyclical in your thoughts so that you're careful about. There's one thing, you know, I've learned in business that after a purple patch comes one thing, and it's generally a crap patch. So that happens. So when you're in a purple patch, dial it down, get everything in order. Set yourself up, put some money away, because then you'll be able to ride out the cycles. But I think the cycles, we haven't seen too many really critical cycles over the years, or over the last 20 years. Obviously, COVID was not so much a cycle issue, but there'll be more devastating shocks throughout the world, you would think, over the next 20 years. So you've got two macro issues of more leisure globally and more devastating shocks globally, and trying to manage through that. I think you need good people around you. So that's probably my view on that, certainly the next 3 to 5 years.
I like that. I really like it. Simon, I've just thought of one final question. Obviously, if there's anybody contemplating a career in the industry, is there any advice that you would give them?
I think it's worthwhile to do a degree. I think it brings a level of education and knowledge. I think you could apply a law degree to hospitality, and you don't necessarily have to practice, but the thoughts of I've often sort of been a frustrated lawyer and would have loved to have done a law degree. There's a business degree you can do a tourism degree as well. So I think that sounding is good discipline. And then I think, tourism and hospitality, it's a lot of upfront work in the first decade, and there's a lot of people, and you're sort of it feels like you're in a mass of people and you're struggling to get your colour and stand out. And so there is a perseverance element to that. Sometimes it's not as structured, the pathways, as one would expect in other industries. But that might be the downside of tourism. But there are now more professional jobs in tourism than ever before. You have property roles, legal roles, finance roles, and marketing roles, and so on. So in fact, the amount of professional roles is far greater. But the first 10 years, it's perseverance, finding the right people, being in the right organisation. But once you punch through that, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think also take the time to travel. If you're going to be in tourism and hospitality, at least try and, move around, and because you become a richer person and a better hotelier for that. And I think it also brings a level of confidence. And in today's world, everyone does need a level of confidence.
Yeah, that's so true. It just broadens you as a person, I think, just doing that travel. Yeah. Simon, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Brendan. Really appreciate it, and best of luck.
Thank you.